Today we're going to be working through our first lesson together. We're going to cover 4 topics: double vertical strokes, how to shift your hands between notes as you're playing, the basics of dynamics, and we're going to introduce the topic of phrasing, which is something we're going to talk about a ton in this series of lessons. Just a reminder that this video series accompanies my book, which contains all of the exercises and the etudes that we'll be talking about throughout this entire video series. For this entire lesson and its accompanying exercises and etudes, we're going to be talking about the double vertical stroke with the hands set at the interval of a perfect fifth. And just a reminder, if you need a review of how to hold the mallets or any of the other basics, be sure to check out the previous lesson in this series, which is the intro lesson. A double vertical stroke is when both mallets in the same hand strike the marimba at the same time. In order to do this, you just create a really simple bend in the wrist. The exercises in this lesson will allow you to practice the double vertical stroke one hand at a time. So let's start on that first exercise with the right hand. Bring the mallets up to the marimba and set them gently on the marimba bars. This is a great way to test your technique. Make sure your hand is nice and relaxed and that your mallets are parallel to the floor. Now move your mallets to the starting position, which for us is going to be up above the notes we're going to play. This is a really important point. We're going to almost always be using what's called a piston stroke. All that means is that your mallets are going to start above the note you're going to play at the proper height. And then when you play, the mallets will go down to meet the marimba and come directly back up to the starting point. This is a much more efficient way to play than keeping your mallets down close to the bar and going up, down to play the note, back up, and then back down to this resting position. As you can see from what I just described, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 motions if you're not using the piston stroke. If you are using the piston stroke, you've got 1, 2 motions. The piston stroke is just a starting point, but it's a really important starting point, and it will help your playing be efficient, and will help your hands stay relaxed, and it will also help with your accuracy. So let's check out this first exercise together. Let's actually break this exercise down even further. I want you to take a measure of rest and put it in between every single measure that you play. So that modified version of this first exercise will sound like this. And so on. Now you might be thinking, we're only on the first exercise of this series and we're already modifying the exercises that are written in the book. What's up with that? Well, I actually want you to be modifying these exercises throughout the entire book. I didn't want to write a 400-page book full of every single possible example of what an exercise might be. I wanted to give you a great starting point, and then through this video series, give you the tools that you need to modify the exercises to suit exactly what you need to be working on at any given moment. So for instance, there's a couple things that you'll notice about how I'm playing this first exercise. You'll notice that when I play, I'm always using the piston stroke. So the mallets are always starting up, meeting the marimba, and coming back up to the starting point. You'll also notice that I'm always shifting my mallets to hover above the next note I'm going to play immediately after I'm done playing the preceding notes. So let me demonstrate that. This is another really important aspect of this basic technique that we're talking about. If you'll do your shifts just the way that I'm describing them here, it will help a ton with your accuracy, especially as the music gets busier and faster and more complex. So, by inserting these empty measures of rest in between the measures that we're playing, it's giving us a lot of time to focus on the piston stroke, which is new, the shifts to the new notes, which is a new concept as well. So, all I'm really doing by inserting those rests is giving myself a little bit more time to learn these concepts that we're talking about. I'm going to shift to using my left hand now, but I want to emphasize that you should spend a lot of time on each hand individually and spend more time on your weaker hand than on your stronger hand, which will be tricky to do, but if you do it, it'll really help your playing. Another crucial way to modify these exercises is by playing each exercise at a bunch of different dynamics. And I write this into the book. I give you a dynamic range for almost every single exercise throughout the entire book. The reason that I do this is that sometimes students will say to me, it's hard to play quiet, or it's hard to play really loud. And the reality is that nothing is hard, it's just some things are more familiar than other things. So for instance, if you spend your entire practice time playing at a mezzo forte dynamic level, mezzo forte will feel super comfortable and super easy to you. On the other hand, if you practice piano and mezzo forte and forte and all the dynamics in between, each of those dynamics will start to feel really comfortable to you. And so when you're in a piece of music and you have to play really quiet, it won't feel like it's hard, it won't feel like it's unfamiliar, it'll feel like something that you've done all the time and that is really easy for you and comfortable and fun. So let's now play that first exercise again as printed, but let's play it piano. So there's a couple things that you might have noticed. First of all, I bet even if you had been playing that video on mute, you could tell that I was playing piano and not forte. And this is a really important point that I want to make, which is that in percussion, stick heights equal dynamics. In other words, I don't have to work hard to play forte. I don't have to play harder. I don't have to push harder into the instrument. All I have to do is start with my sticks higher up above the instrument and let gravity do the work to make my full, louder dynamic. And along the exact same lines, if I want to play piano, I don't have to work hard. I don't have to force myself to hit the marimba less hard than I would for forte. All I have to do is start with the mallets really low to the instrument, let them drop in a really relaxed way, and the resulting dynamic will be soft, quiet piano. If you'll use this philosophy for dynamics, stick heights equal dynamics, then you'll never have this feeling that you have to work hard to play forte or that you have to work really hard to play piano. Just think about stick heights, and the stick heights will take care of the volume that you want to play at any given time. Now that we've practiced this exercise with both hands individually, let's put the hands together. I'm going to play this exercise at a mezzo piano dynamic. Notice that I'm still using those piston strokes. The mallet is starting and ending at the same height above the marimba, and that I'm still doing my shifts from one note to the next immediately after I'm done playing the note before it. Now we're going to talk about the last topic today, phrasing. Playing musical phrases essentially means that you're making subtle changes in how loud or how quiet each note is. Think of a musical phrase like a sentence, and the individual notes that you're playing like words in that sentence. If I just say a sentence totally monotone and boring, it doesn't sound like I'm trying to communicate to you. It sounds like I'm some kind of a weird robot or something like that. And the same is true in music. If every single note that you play is the exact same dynamic level, then it doesn't sound like you're playing music, it just sounds like you're playing a bunch of notes that are totally unrelated to one another. But when you make these subtle changes in how loud or how quiet each note is, it gives the music a direction. It sounds like you're telling a story, or that you're trying to communicate something, or that you're trying to make people feel something while you're playing. And really, at the end of the day, that's the whole reason that we play music. Not so that we can get a technique down. The technique is just to serve the music that you're playing and to help you tell your story. So even if you see only one dynamic indication in a piece of music, let's say mezzo forte, that doesn't mean that you play every single note in that piece of music the exact same volume level. Mezzo forte is a range of how loud or how quiet you play. It's not a fixed point in space. So for instance, the first 4 measures of this etude just say mezzo forte. But you see those little marks that go over the music. Those are phrase markings. And that's telling you that this isn't a series of words that have nothing to do with each other. This is a complete sentence and a complete musical thought. So if you look at the phrasing exercise number 1, I write in there suggestions for how you might want to phrase this passage in the piece. And you'll notice that phrasing exercise number 1 is exactly identical to the first line in the etude, and that is totally on purpose. I want all of these exercises to reinforce what you're learning in the etude. I don't want you to have to learn more notes. I want you to use the material that's already in the etude, create exercises out of that to help you practice all these concepts that we're talking about in the lessons. To illustrate this point, I'm going to try playing phrasing exercise number 1 exactly flat, all the same dynamic level the entire time. Now I'm going to play phrasing exercise number 1 with the suggested shape that I give you in the book. With just a little bit of variation in how loud or how quiet each note is, suddenly I'm not just spouting a bunch of notes at you, I'm telling you something, or I'm hopefully giving you a little bit of a sense of direction in this piece of music. Okay, we've talked about a lot today. We've talked about double vertical strokes. We've talked about how to shift between notes. We've talked about the piston stroke, a really basic technique that we're going to revisit a bunch. We've talked about the basics of dynamics, and we talked about phrasing and how to play musical phrases. Next week, we're going to continue to talk about double vertical strokes, but we're also going to introduce the idea of interval changes within one hand.